He shaped the sound of a generation, yet never was its poster boy. While others took center stage, he built the soul of the music behind the glass. From silent studios to world stages, Benny Andersson lived to the rise, the unraveling and rebirth of one of pop's most iconic bands. But the story he's only now telling isn't about disco balls or sequins. It's about exhaustion, regret, fractured love, and the painful silence that followed the applause. After decades of speculation, Benny has spoken, and his truth is deeper, sadder, and more revealing than anyone expected. Building a kingdom of sound. Early life before the world ever danced to the beat of Dancing Queen or wept to melancholy the winner takes it all. Benny Andersson was already busy shaping the invisible foundation of what would become one of pop music's most enduring legacies. Born on December 16, 1946 in the Vasan district of Stockholm, Benny grew up in a working-class household where music was not a career path, but a cherished tradition. His father, a civil engineer, and his grandfather, a self-taught musician, introduced Benny to the accordion at the age of 6. That humble instrument would unlock a fascination with melody and harmony that would never leave him. Unlike many of his peers who longed for stardom, Benny was not driven by a desire to be seen. He was more interested in understanding how music worked. From the mathematical structure of Bach to the earthy storytelling of Swedish folk songs, he taught himself piano by ear and could replicate melodies after hearing them just once or twice. By the age of 10, he was already playing for family gatherings and school concerts. Known not for showmanship, but for his innate sensitivity to tone and emotion. In 1964, at just 18, Benny joined the Heap Stars, a Swedish rock band that would become known as the Swedish Beatles. With his arrival, their sound matured almost overnight. The group began topping the Swedish charts with hits like Sunny Girl and Wedding, songs penned by Benny himself. These early successes not only revealed his ability to write memorable melodies, but also honed his skills in studio arrangement and live performance. He quickly became known as the band's musical brain, while also quietly developing an understanding of the commercial and technical sides of the industry. Then came a pivotal night in 1966. Benny met Bernos while both were performing at a mutual friend's party. Bern, a member of the folk pop group the Hoot Nanny Singers, shared Benny's love of harmony, arrangement, and detail. Their jam session that evening led to an instant musical partnership. Over the next few years, they began writing together, experimenting with different styles and structures, and even composing songs for other Swedish artists. Their collaborative bond grew strong, not just because of mutual respect, but because they balanced each other perfectly. Benny, the emotional composer, Bern, the witty lyricist. By the early 1970s, Benny and Bern were not only co-writers, but also partners in life with two fellow musicians, Agnia Feldskog, a chart-topping Swedish solo artist, and Anifred Frida Lingstad, a jazz-turned-pop singer with a powerful alto voice. Their joint musical venture took form under the lengthy name Bern and Benny, Agnetha, and Anifred. The name was clumsy, but the chemistry was electric. They tried and failed to win the Swedish election for Eurovision in 1973. Undeterred, they came back the next year with Waterloo, a glam pop anthem that won the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest and instantly made them international stars. Shortly afterward, they adopted a more memorable name, a BBA, an acronym using the initials of their first names. From that moment on, Benny was no longer just a pop musician. He was a sonic architect. He treated each song like a painting, layering instruments, arranging vocal harmonies with precision, and experimenting with synthesizers long before it was trendy. In the studio, he was known for his patience and perfectionism, sometimes spending days reworking a single harmony until it felt emotionally right. He wasn't interested in what was popular. He was interested in what was timeless. Even as Agnia and Frida dazzled audiences in matching jumpsuits, and Bern penned clever, bittersweet lyrics, it was Benny who sculpted the emotional subtext of Abba's music. His signature style blended brightness with depth, a Swedish melancholia masked in melody. Songs like Knowing Me, Knowing You, and Fernando carried this duality. Joy on the surface, sadness underneath. That was Benny's gift, not just to pop music, but to generations of listeners who felt something deeper in Abba's seemingly simple songs. In truth, Benny Andersson wasn't just building songs. He was building a kingdom, one where every chord, every silence, every note mattered. And while the spotlight often shone elsewhere, the architecture of Abba's sound was unmistakably his. Falling apart while climbing higher. For most of the 1970s, Abba rode an unstoppable wave of fame. But as the band soared publicly, it began to erode privately. The unraveling wasn't sudden. It was subtle, slow, like a house weathered by time rather than destroyed by fire. The first crack came in 1979 when Byrne and Agnetha divorced. It was a deeply personal break, but one that the band tried to weather professionally. At the time, the group was working on their album Super Trooper, and though the songs retained their signature polish, the sessions began to carry a new heavy tone. 2 years later, Benny and Frida followed the same path. Their relationship had once been described as fiery and symbiotic, a true musical love story. They met in 1969, long before Abba, and built a connection through sound before anything else. Frida once said in a 1975 interview that Benny understood her in a way no one else did. But understanding in the studio didn't always translate into real life. Benny's obsessive perfectionism, which made him brilliant in the studio, left little room for emotional availability at home. Frida, expressive and emotional, felt the growing absence. By 1981, Benny confessed to having fallen in love with Mona Nerklet, a television producer he met during a broadcast special. He told Frida the truth, but the damage was done. The split was quiet, professional even, but it carved a deep scar into the band's dynamic. The next and final studio album, The Visitors, released that same year, reflected the emotional frost setting in. Songs like When All Is Said and Done and Slipping Through My Fingers dripped with unspoken pain. The sparkle was fading, and though the band would continue for another year, something vital had already disappeared, confirming the silence we all felt. For over 40 years, the story of Abba's end was defined not by explosive headlines, but by a deafening silence. Unlike most legendary bands that go out with farewell tour, a breakup press conference, or some final cathartic performance, Abba simply vanished. Their last official single, Under Attack, was released in December 1982. It failed to make the impact of their earlier hits. There was no follow-up album, no world tour, no curtain call, just a gradual fade into the mist of speculation and fan theories that would stretch across decades. Their absence left a void, and into that void came endless questions. Why did they stop when they were still so successful? Did money tear them apart? Was it personal drama, creative conflict? For years, none of the band members gave a definitive answer. Interviews remained vague. The word hiatus floated around, and their public appearances became rare and cautiously polite. In many ways, Abba became a myth frozen in time, the perfect pop group that simply ceased to exist without explanation. That changed in November 2024. Benny Andersson, long known for his quiet introspection and avoidance of personal publicity, sat down for an interview with The Guardian. He didn't arrive with a rehearsed narrative. There was no publicist-crafted statement or airbrush PR spin. Instead, Benny did something rare. He told the truth plainly. We were exhausted, he admitted. Marriages were falling apart. The music was starting to sound unnatural. We needed to stop to preserve ourselves. That plain, unsentimental sentence hit harder than any scandal ever could. In just a few words, Benny confirmed what many longtime fans had always suspected. The breakup hadn't come from betrayal or artistic feuding. It had come from emotional depletion. After years of performing, recording, and maintaining the illusion of joy while their personal lives collapsed behind the scenes, the group was drained. Not dramatically, quietly, fatally. Then, in April 2025, Benny gave a follow-up interview to Billboard, offering even deeper insight. He described the band's final 2 years, 1981 and 1982, as uninspired work days. What had once been vibrant collaboration had turned into routine. He and Byrne were still writing, but without the same energy or purpose. The songs came more slowly. The studio sessions were shorter. Everything had started to feel like a job, not a passion. Even more telling was how Benny framed the group's decision to stop. He didn't call it a failure. He didn't romanticize it. He described it as an inevitable unraveling. It wasn't sustainable anymore. He said we couldn't go on pretending, not to each other, not to ourselves. This acknowledgement wasn't just illuminating. It was healing. For decades, fans had heard that final ABBA albums like The Visitors felt different, more introspective, more melancholic. Songs like One of Us, like An Angel Passing Through My Room, and The Day Before You Came didn't just sound sad. They were sad. There was a heaviness in the lyrics and arrangements that betrayed something deeper than pop trends. Listeners felt it, even if they couldn't name it. Benny's confession validated that feeling. The ache, the sense of something unraveling beneath the polished surface, wasn't projection. It was real. What's striking is that none of Benny's revelations carried bitterness. He didn't place blame on Burr and Agnetha or Frida. Instead, he spoke of the band's end like a natural conclusion, like a beautiful machine that had run its course. We had done what we could do, he said. There was nothing left in us to give it honestly. For fans, it was a closure they never knew they needed. The mystery was no longer mysterious. The silence had a reason. And most importantly, the pain that echoed through ABA's final songs now had a name. Exhaustion, emotional collapse, and a quiet necessity of walking away. Frida's path through grief and royalty. After ABBA's quiet dissolution, Frida embarked on a journey no one quite expected. In 1992, she married Prince Heinrich Russo-Royce-Plauen, becoming a member of European royalty. The Swedish press went into a frenzy. How could the same woman who once ruled disco floors now be living in a Swiss castle, attending galas and banquets? But life as a princess wasn't the fairy tale it appeared to be. Frida struggled with the rigidity of aristocratic expectations. The spontaneity and emotion that defined her as a performer didn't fit into the structured world of royalty. And then came the deepest heartbreak of her life. In 1998, her daughter and Lisa L. died in a car accident in New York. She was just 30 years old. The loss was devastating. The woman who once sang to millions now sought silence, grief-stricken in her secluded home near Lake Geneva. The glitz of royalty, the fame of her past, it all palled in comparison to the emptiness left by her daughter's absence. And yet it was Benny who reappeared during that time. Despite everything, he reached out. They shared a past no one else could understand. And in their quiet reconnection, there was comfort, not in reliving the glory days, but in the understanding that only two people who had seen everything fall apart could truly share. Frida, who once needed the spotlight to feel seen, had now found peace in simply being remembered, not by the world, but by someone who had known her before it all. Returning without regret in 2018, after decades apart, the unthinkable happened. ABBA came together to record 2 new songs. That announcement shook the music world, not just because it snapped a 36-year silence, but because it marked the starting point of one of the most ambitious projects in music history, ABBA Voyage. By 2021, Benny and Burn had written a full-length studio album of the same name, and Benny had taken full creative control of the production. But more than the music, it was a performance model that changed everything. ABA Voyage wasn't a concert as known. It was a digital experience. Using motion capture and avatar technology, Benny and his team recreated the band's 1979 selves, performing live with a 10-piece band at a purpose-built arena in London. The show was an astonishing success. Since its opening in May 2022, it has sold more than 1.3 million tickets, attracting fans from over 140 countries. These digital avatars didn't just mimic, they transcended expectation. Benny, ever the craftsman, oversaw even the smallest sound design details, insisting performance be authentic, emotionally precise, and flawless in technique. And perhaps most remarkably, the band declined a $1 billion offer for a live tour. They didn't want to chase the old high. Instead, they redefined performance on their terms. The avatars, like Benny himself, didn't need to be seen to be felt. The music spoke for them as it always had, letting the music Benny Andersson finally opens up speak the truth. Now at 78, Benny Andersson no longer conceals himself behind perfect harmonies or studio walls. In recent interviews, he's been quietly unpacking decades of emotional restraint. He's admitted that music was his escape. He didn't know how to talk about pain, so he composed it instead. He once said, "I gave my best lines to songs, not to the people who needed to hear them from me." That line, so simple, so raw, reframes everything we thought we knew. Benny wasn't cold. He was scared. Scared to confront the emotions that swirl beneath every love song, every breakup ballad, every hit that masked heartache. And that fear, that silence is what ultimately undid the band from within. Not drama, not betrayal, just fragility. The kind of human softness that fame never prepared them to handle. But there's beauty in his honesty. Because by finally saying these things aloud, Benny is doing what Abba never did, offering closure. He's telling us that it was never about perfection. It was always about survival. The music didn't save them from their pain. It was how they lived through it. And perhaps that's why the songs endure. They were never polished fantasies. They were real, messy, complicated fragments of four people trying to hold themselves together. And now, after all these years, the quiet man at the piano has finally let us in. How do you think ABBA's music might have sounded if it had faced their emotions head-on instead of through their songs? Let us know in the comments.